Krishna, which is fulfilled. Bestowing your mercy, you make them a resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you will also grant me a residence within the pleasure groves of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of the cowherd damsels of Braja. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maidservant, this very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise. May I always swim in the love of Sri Radha and Govinda. Vrindayai Tulsi Devyai Priyayai Kesavasucha Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi.
Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi. Bhagavata Namo Namaha. Jaya Vasudev Jaya Vasudha Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi. Jaya Tulasidev.
Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Guru Dev, Guru Dev, Guru Dev, Jaya Jaya Guru Dev. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Statara Parakacharya Divine Grace of Chara Vinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. BBT founder, ISKCON founder, Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Radha Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavanam Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Swami Ki Jai. Shri Gangamai Ki Jai. Shri Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading the 10th canto, continuing our study of the pastimes of Lord Krishna. This is chapter 44, and starting at text 34, I'm just going to read a few texts until there's a purport. So we'll start with text 34. Evam vikatamen kamse prakupito vyaya lagin nadpatya tarasha manchamutun gamaruhat evam vikatamanevai kamse prakupito vyaya lagim nadpatya tarasha mantyam utungamaruhat evam vikatamanevai kamsa prakupito vyaya lagim nadpatya tarasha mancham utungamaruhat evam vikate manevai kamse prakupito yaya lagim padpatya tarasha mancham utungamaruhat evam vikata manevai kamse prakupito yaya lagim nadpatya tarasha mancham utungamaruhat evam vikata manevai kamse prakupito yaya lagim nadpatya tarasha mancham utungamaruhat evam vikata manevai kamse prakupito vaya lagim nadpatya tarasha mancham utungamaruhat evam. Thus Vikatamane, exclaiming with audacity, Vai, indeed, Kamsa, Prakupita, becoming extremely angry, Avyaya, the infallible Lord, Lagimna, with ease, Utpatya, jumping up, Tarasha, swiftly, Mancham, the royal platform, Untungam, tall, Aruhat, climbed onto. Translation: As Kansa thus raved so audaciously, the infallible Lord Krishna, intensely angry, quickly and easily jumped up onto the high royal dais. So there's just two more texts until there's a purport, or actually three. So maybe we can all recite together. So starting with text 35. Ta, the Sanskrit. Sanskrit. Tamavishantamalokya mrityum atmana asanat manasvi sahasotaya jagre si charmani. Seeing Lord Krishna approaching like death personified, the quick-witted Kansa instantly rose from his seat and took up his sword and shield. Text 36. Tam kadyapanim vicharantam asu sanamayata dakshina savyamambare samagrahe darvasha grograteja yatoragam taksha sutabrahasana. Sword in hand, Kansa moved quickly from side to side like a hawk in the sky. But Lord Krishna, whose fearsome strength is irresistible, powerfully seized the demon just as the son of Tarksha might capture a snake. Text 37. Pragriya kesheshu chalat priritam nipatya rango paritunga manchat tasyo parishtat svayam avjadnaba patpatya vishvashraya datma tantra. Grabbing Kansa by the hair and knocking off his crown, the lotus-naveled lord threw him off the elevated dais onto the wrestling mat. Then the independent lord, the support of the entire universe, threw himself upon the king. Purport. This is by the servants of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. In Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada describes the death on Kamsa as follows. Krishna at once straddled his chest and began to strike him over and over again. Simply by the strokes of Kamsa's fists, Kamsa lost his vital force. Om Jnanatanamandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unnitayena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnuvadaya Krishna Vastaya Bhaktivinoda Srimati Krishna Das Goswami Yoginamine Namo Vishnuvadaya Krishna Vastaya Bhaktivinoda Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Yoginamine. So I just wanted to read from the Krishna book this little bit because that's a part of what happens, but it's just elaborated a little bit. It's unfolding a little bit more. And we heard about, I don't know if anybody read Krishna book for the last little bit when everything was going on with the wrestlers, but if you get a chance, I could read it all, but I think maybe somebody already read it, but okay. Yeah, it is amazing because we know for maybe 14. I saw somewhere it was 11 years, somewhere it's 14 years. Krishna's only 14, 11 or 14 years old at this time. He's very young, and since his birth, Kamsa has been every single day thinking about when he's going to die. Who is this personality that's going to kill him? Who is this person? And he, of course, he has his ideas, he has his suspicions of who it is, but he cannot get it out of his mind. He's just meditating on it night and day. All the time he's meditating. Maybe he didn't know exactly what Krishna looked like or didn't know about him so much personally, but knew that that was death personified and he was coming for him. So for so many years, Kansa has been trying his best to avert that. He's been trying to cheat death. He's been trying to outrun his fate. And, over time, he's sent so many, wicked personalities who would align with his vision of him being the supreme ruler and the controller of everything he surveys. So he's recruited so many people and so many personalities to try to, um, further that vision and try to support him with that ideal and, sent them to kill Krishna. And so many times, over and over and over and over, starting with when Krishna was a baby. I'm sure he was thinking that Krishna as a baby is very vulnerable. We think of babies; they're helpless. They don't have any way to defend or do anything. They can't even go to the bathroom themselves. So this is a baby who Kamsa didn't realize um, could kill someone very easily because they're all personal exchanges. With Putana had another life where she was meditating on the Lord, but then she became very upset with the Lord. So, in this particular incarnation, she was acting as Kamsa's henchwoman, and was, gladly and willingly sent to try to kill Krishna. And ultimately, that attempt was thwarted. But Krishna, as he did subsequently with each and every personality that was sent his way, there was some kind of there was an exchange. There was when you're meditating on someone and someone's meditating on you. On a subtle level, there's an energy exchange. There's a kind of reciprocation. And maybe it's negative or maybe it's positive. And I'm sure we've all been there when we think about, say, we think about somebody that, um, maybe we don't get along with. I won't say hate, but we think of somebody that we don't really, somehow or other, we can't really see their perspectives, or we don't really agree on how uh, they're living their lives, or just so many experiences. And, it tends to get in your brain like, why isn't this person doing this? Why can't they just, do this? Why aren't they, and obviously with good intentions, hopefully we're trying to we're thinking about that person favorably to try to help them or to try to support them even subtly. So when there was so many demons or personalities, I'm going to say, because we all know by association or poor association that um, a demon can turn into a devotee, or devotee can turn into a demon, right? So it's just the right association. So all these personalities that Kamsa sent to do his bidding, who obviously were a little vulnerable themselves, and they were weak-willed, and they apparently thought that Kamsa was greater than Krishna. Their misfortune. They had poor discrimination. That's our downfall, is conditioned souls. Not that these personalities particularly were conditioned souls, but we all have poor discrimination a lot of times in our daily lives. So maybe we align ourselves in a way that isn't favorable to our Krishna consciousness, and that's sort of what happened with these personalities. And Kamsa kept sending them because they were willing, and they were weak-minded, weak-willed, and we see that even up to the end. You think of these when we think of these wrestlers, and there was so many personalities that we can name that over time were ultimately defeated by Krishna. They weren't obviously successful. And they all had their stuff, and they were all also meditating on Krishna. Maybe it was only for a short time. They didn't get that boon of having meditated on Krishna for 14 years arbitrarily. Maybe it was a little bit of time as they just plotted to what the best approach was to try to do Kamsa's bidding. But they were all in some kind of subtle reciprocal relationship with Krishna. And as we've seen with all of them, Putna, starting with Mother Putna, who, had her life force sucked out, but, in that offering, Krishna also granted her this boon of, being taken into his personal association. And also with other personalities in that, time frame, same thing. They were all given this boon of being taken into his association, and ultimately, eternal pastimes. Because as he killed all these personalities, they entered back into him. So nothing was lost, even though it was, the age old fight against, good against evil and who will win. There was still no loss or diminution of the sort of service that these personalities rendered to Krishna, you know. And Krishna likes to fight, Krishna likes to have fun. And we've seen, even in the up to this last bit, I feel like this wrestling match, I don't know, it seems like this was by far the most fun that probably Krishna maybe had, him and Balaram together. And also for so many spectators, because when he was uh, killing all the other sort of personalities, there wasn't so many people around. A lot of times, Putana snuck in and they did the whole thing, and nobody knew, nobody saw. The cart demon was there, and he just kicked the cart, and then the demon died. Nobody was really there. So there wasn't a big audience. But with the wrestling match, there was this huge, everybody, Kansa decided to invite everybody in the whole land to see what he thought was going to be the end of Krishna, because he was just so puffed up. I mean, he didn't know, he wasn't in his right mind practically. He didn't know what he was doing, because he had been intoxicated thinking about Krishna. He was completely out of his mind, intoxicated, thinking about Krishna for the last 14 years, thinking about how he was going to kill him, and tried and tried and tried, sending elephants, this and that. So finally, when the boys were there, Krishna's friend, everybody was there watching. Sometimes the boys didn't even see when Krishna killed different personalities. They were busy playing, or they saw Agasura. They saw some, but they didn't see everything so clearly. This was like a show. This was actually like the grand finale show, that everybody could see, and the boys were there, and the gopis obviously weren't there because they would have been mortified. So he saved them of that, and his elders were there, and they were just had their hands on their heads and thinking, oh my God, Krishna's just this tender, he's so sweet and tender, and he can't have the, and then everybody in the audience was in the same fashion thinking, well, this isn't even an even match. There's these huge, enormous guys, and they're going to pound on Krishna. I mean, that's what it ostensibly looked like. And, a lot of the artwork, even, especially the older artwork, not so much now. I see newer artwork of Krishna and Balaram, and they're slaying these, particularly these wrestlers, and they tend to be like 2 foot higher than Krishna. But Krishna being like, looking a little bit more, older as far as like maturity, and, maybe even more muscular or like that. But in the older depictions that I've seen, Krishna and Balaram just look like these little boys. They look like they're 8 or 10 years old. They're just like, they're just dressed really, they don't look like they're ready to fight. And then they, when they start to get into it with the wrestlers, they're obviously taken aback. And the biggest disappointment is from Kamsa. Everybody in the arena, if you can envision it, it's I don't know. I find it quite an interesting vision where everybody in the arena is just looking at this whole mismatch, and they're thinking that something's going to happen, but then something else happens, and then Kamsa's just, he can't believe it, because this is his, prize star, big guys that he's been, they've been training, and they're probably working out all the time, and they're just pounding down all the proteins and doing all the things, and they're just doing all the things. They're huge. They're huge. They're hulks. They're like hulks, and they're quite imposing. But then, you know, they get easily beat down. Just not even taking any thought. You know, and Kamsa's just freaking out. He can't believe what he's seeing. And then, Krishna, the boys are all cheering, all of his friends. Krishna runs over to them and they're like, and then they start tussling and they start wrestling. And then the boys beat Krishna, you know. The boys beat Krishna. Krishna's like, oh, you have me, you got me. He's very easily slayed by their love, and their care and their support. He's just ecstatic that they're there and they're all together and they're having fun once again like they were in Vrindavan. They did all those things. They wrestled and they played all kind of fun little games in Vrindavan, and it was just like a little reunion. And Kamsa was even more upset. He couldn't believe that these boys were actually beating Krishna, and the wrestlers were laying there. And it's a gruesome scene, there's all these dead bodies around, and Krishna, and then Kamsa's like, stop that music. He can't stand to see all of his plans thwarted. So it's just a funny visual because, as Kamsa, and for me personally too, you kind of envision things that something looks like maybe it's going a certain way in life, or maybe you have a perspective on how something should turn out, but you never know, right? You never know how it's going to look. You never know what what twists and turns are going to happen as you're going through your life. And it's kind of, I feel like, I kind of feel Kamsa in that way. Obviously he had horrible intentions and he was, demonic, but if he's meditating on something so vividly for so many years, um, you know, you hear about it a lot in the world. Like people, maybe they go to school for 8 or 10 years for a certain career, or you hear about it and then they maybe fall ill, or, they can't practice or whatever they're doing. Or you hear about it even in sports a lot where somebody's like grooming themselves for years to be a football player. And then when they're in college, they break their leg or they bust their knee and they can never do those things again. So, it's a huge disappointment, right? And we face a lot of those disappointments on a regular basis in our lives, I'll say. They're probably obviously to a lot lesser degree. And especially sometimes when they're a well intentioned, you have good intentions to do something that you feel like is the right way to go in your life, and then somehow or other that's thwarted. Sometimes we're disappointed, sometimes we're angry, sometimes we can get, a little upset. I've actually heard of devotees being upset with Krishna because he, maybe they had a child that somehow came out with a birth defect, and they, were disappointed with that outcome. For instance, I've heard of that. We've all heard of these things. But at the end of the day, unlike Kamsa, who just didn't want to believe Krishna was the supreme personality of Godhead and the supreme controller, at the end of the day, that's always what we can fall back on. We have to remember that Krishna's the controller of everything. We have to remember that, we're not the doers. We're not, we can only stand by, we can try our best, but ultimately we have to just surrender to that, surrender to his will, which is what Kamsa didn't do. At that point, when he got that message, whenever, he was with Devaki and Vasudev, he should have probably examined his life at that point. He should have been a little introspective, but that wasn't happening. And it continued not to happen, even though so many times he saw practically that no one was able to defeat Krishna and all of his plans were slowly eroding, he still didn't, he wasn't introspective. So, this is sort of the culmination of the whole 10th canto. You know, throughout that whole time after Krishna was born, he performed so many beautiful pastimes. He endeared so many people and his devotees. He was able to, everybody loved him. Everybody fell in love with him over that time, except for Kamsa. You know, he still was so envious. He was just the most envious of all. And we're seeing how firsthand, Krishna, he'll come as cruel death and he takes it all away. He'll take everything away. And I just wanted to read this bit in the Krishna book. So we've heard about the wrestlers. And then after the wrestlers, it's not so much described of everything that happened, but after the wrestlers were killed, it said, while trumpets resounded and drums were beaten, the leg bells on the feet of Krishna and Balaram tinkled. They were dancing around. All the people gathered there began to clap in great ecstasy, and no one could estimate the bounds of their pleasure, because ultimately everybody saw too that this was in person good triumph, being triumphant over evil. The Brahmanas present began to praise Krishna and Balaram ecstatically. Only Kamsa was morose. He neither clapped nor offered benediction to Krishna. Kamsa resented that the trumpets and drums should be played for Krishna's victory, and he was very sorry that the wrestlers had been killed and had fled the assembly. He therefore immediately ordered the band to stop playing and addressed his men as follows. I order that these two sons of Vasudev be immediately driven out of Mathura. The cowherd boys who have come with them should be plundered and all their riches taken away. Nanda Maharaj should immediately be arrested and killed for his cunning behavior, and that rascal Vasudev should also be killed without delay. Also, my father, Ugrasena, who has always supported my enemies against my will, should be killed. So here's this guy, and he's throwing out these orders. When Kamsa spoke in this way, Lord Krishna became very angry with him. And within a second, he jumped onto the high dais of King Kamsa. So he was giving him even up to that point. Like if Kamsa would have seen all that, I'm 100% sure, because Krishna is so kind, if he would have seen all that, Kamsa, and seen the wrestlers killed, just taken account of everything and knew that this was it. This was the moment of truth for him. And just been humble and with folded hands, begged for forgiveness, begged for his life, just begged Krishna for some boon. And we've seen it. We've seen it with Jagai Madai and Chaitanya Charitamrita. Jagai begged, Lord Nityananda, begged Lord Chaitanya, and they forgave him. We've seen so many instances of forgiveness, and that can happen in an instant with anybody. Instantly you can be forgiven. If you really try to reciprocate with Krishna and connect with Krishna, obviously, if you're not trying and you're just like the elephant who keeps throwing dirt on his back after he takes a bath and expecting forgiveness, there's got to be the intention of, trying your best. If you're trying your best, you're trying your very hardest to remember Krishna, to serve Krishna. And, maybe something unintentional comes up and you beg for forgiveness. So Krishna's giving Kansa this opportunity. He's there. He's watching. He's waiting. But Kamsa still, up to the very end, starts ordering the poor cowherd boys to be fleeced and, everything taken away. And Nanda Maharaj, he actually brought his tribute, all of his product and money and whatever was required. He went there with good intentions to, be a part of the assembly, give Kamsa the tribute. I say tribute like it seems like a mob mentality. because, Kansa wanted all these wealths, the best wealth from all the villages. So, then he wouldn't plunder their village or he wouldn't kill anybody in their city. It seems like that kind of mentality to me. But anyway, Nanda Maharaj brought all of his things and he was all with all good intentions, just trying to be a humble servant of the kingdom, a humble servant of Kansa. But he wanted him killed. And even his own father, even his own father who he had imprisoned, just everybody must be killed. He could have begged for forgiveness at that point. I'm quite sure Krishna would have forgave him, and it would have took a different turn. Kamsa could have been saved. But instead, when Kamsa spoke in this way, Lord Krishna became very angry with him, and within a second, he jumped up onto the high dais of King Kamsa. I can imagine this dais is probably like 12 foot high or, 15 feet high. Kamsa was prepared for Krishna's attack, for he knew from the beginning that Krishna was to be the supreme cause of his death. Kamsa immediately unsheathed his sword and prepared to answer the challenge of Krishna with sword and shield. As Kamsa wheeled his sword up and down, hither and thither, Lord Krishna, the supreme powerful Lord, caught hold of him with great force. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the shelter of the complete creation and from whose lotus navel the whole creation is manifested, immediately knocked the crown from his head and grabbed his long hair in his hand. It said that he grabbed his long hair because that's what Kamsa had done to Devaki at the time, grabbing her hair. That's just like an animal. You knock a crown off of someone. Who does this person think he is? Grab him by the hair. He then dragged Kamsa from the seat to the wrestling dais and threw him down right in the ring. Then at once, Krishna straddled his chest and began to strike him over and over again. Simply from the strokes of Krishna's fist, Kamsa lost his vital force. And also from the original, from what we just read in the Bhagavatam, knowing that Krishna is sort of the reservoir of the whole universe, at that point, Krishna probably made himself very, very heavy, right? And just sat down on his chest and just started to give him a beat down right on the wrestling. And, I can't say that it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. I mean, he had so many chances. And, it's a testament to Krishna's merciful and kind nature. And also, we are all to much, 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 much lesser degrees. We're like, we're all a little like Kamsa. I'm not saying we're little Kamsas, but we're a little like Kamsa, where we're just thinking we can do whatever we want and we're not accountable and that nobody sees. But, Krishna's always watching. Krishna's always there in our hearts. There's the super soul and there's the soul. And the super soul is always just like the silent, observant bird, like two birds in a tree. He's always watching. And, he knew all this was going to happen. He's always giving us those chances. He comes to so many chances. And even the demons and everybody gave him so many chances. And he was merciful to them because they were directed by Kamsa. They didn't even they had their own free will, but they weren't really thinking straight. They had surrendered to Kamsa. They submitted themselves to do his bidding. But I'm quite sure if any of them had, just did a turnaround at the time they were going to try to kill Krishna, he would have given them all mercy. So we can be grateful for this. I feel always very grateful for this example of Kamsa and for this whole pastime. One, because it's super juicy, this pastime. It's just really, I don't know, it's so relishable to hear about the whole thing. But also because just remembering how kind Krishna is and how not to act, in our lives, how to be humble, stay humble, and just try to serve. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam and all glories to Srila Prabhupada who gave us all these wonderful lessons.
Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami Enam Tanvanda Maravindanalaya Kartam Sarvavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundaram Tandar Ako Vidamaniya Vishesha Shobha Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami Andaniyasa Sakalam Priya Priti Manti Vasyam Vipa Vikayanti Gira Ananda Maya Sadhu Dala Vikasya Govindam Adipurusham Aham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Aham Govindam Adipurusham Namah Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Namah Bhajami Govindam Namah Bhajami Adipurusham Namah Viparave Chesha Aloka Pravesha Nijajari Utaji Iva Shesha Aloka Pravesha Nijajari Utaji Iva Bolo Hari Hari Mukunda Murari Rama Krishna Hare Hayagriva Hariya Damodari Rama Krishna Hayagriva Nashringa Vamana Shimadasudana Rajendranan Dana Shama Lingavamana Shimadasudana Rajendrana Dana Shama Putana Gadana Kaitabasadana Jaya Dasarati Rama Nagatana Kaitabasatana Jaya Dasarati Rama Putana Gatana Kaitabasatana Jaya Dasarati Rama Yasoda Dulala Govinda Gopala Vrindavana Puran Dara Dulala Govinda Gopala Vrindavana Puran Dara Gopi Priya Jana Radhikara Mana Bhuvana Sundara Bara Hai Priya Jana Radhikara Mana Bhuvana Sundara Bara Gopi Priya Jana Radhikara Mana Bhuvana Sundara Bara Ravana Takara Makana Taskara Gopi Jana Vasya Hari Manatakara Makanatakara Gopi Jana Vasya Hari Prajera Rakala Gopa Vrindapala Chitta Hari Bamsit Hari Yogindra Bandana Sri Nandanandana Prajajana Baya Hari Indra Bandana Sri Nandanandana Prajajana Baya Hari Navina Nirada Rupa Manohara Mohana Bamsi Vihari Nanirara Rupa Manohara Mohana Bamsi Vihari Navina Nirara Rupa Manohara Mohana Bamsi Vihari Yasoda Nandana Kamsani Shudana Nikunjara Savi Lasi Yasoda Nandana Kamsani Shudana Nikunjara Savi Lasi Kadamba Kanana Rasa Parayana Vrinda Vipina Nivasi. Kadamba Kanana Rasaparayana Vrinda Vipina Nivasi. Ananda Vardana Premani Ketana Pulasara Yoda Kama Ananda Vardana Premani Ketana Pulasara Yoda Kama Gopanga Ganana Chitavino Dana Samasta Guna Ganada Ama Pangaganana Chitavino Dana Samasta Gun Ganada Ama Yamuna Jivana Kele Parayana Manasa Chanja Chakora Jivana Kele Parayana Manasa Chanja Chakora Yamuna Jivana Kele Parayana Manasa Chanja Chakora Namasurarasa Gayo Krishna Yasa Rakovachana Mana Mora Sudarasa Gayo Krishna Yasa Rakovachana Mana Mora Namasudarasa Gayo Krishna Yasa Rakovachana Mana Mora Bibara Veshesha Aloka Pravesha Nija Jariuta Jiva Bolo Hari Hari Mukunda Murari Rama Krishna Hayagriva Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hari Hari Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Radha Shama Sundar Radha Shama Sundar Radha Shama Sundar Shri Radhe Jaya Radha Golokananda Radha Golokananda Radha Golokananda Shri Radhe Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Giri Govardhan Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Shri Radhe Shri Vishvanandini ki jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai Gora Premananda Haribo. The night has come to an end, and the light of dawn is entering. O Jiva soul, arise and give up your sleep. Chant the holy names of Lord Hari, giver of liberation, enemy of demon Mura, supreme enjoyer, all attractive and Hayagriva, the horse-headed incarnation. Narasimha, half man, half lion incarnation, Vamana, dwarf Brahman incarnation, killer of demon Madhu, beloved son of Braja's ruler, beautifully dark complexioned slayer of witch Putana, destroyer of demon Kaitaba, and victorious son of Dasarath, Lord Rama, darling of Yasoda, giver of pleasure, cows, and spiritual senses, cow protector, Lord of Vrindavan, the gopis' beloved, lover of Radhika and most beautiful in all the worlds, cause of demon Ravana's demise as Lord Rama, butter thief, robber of the gopi girls' clothes, young herdsman of Braj, protector of the other coward boys, thief of hearts and flute carrier, worshipped by the best of the yogis, Nanda's joy, remover of all fears for the people of Braj, colored like a fresh rain cloud, enchanting form, and charming while wandering and playing a flute. Yasoda's joy, vanquisher of demon Kamsa, enjoyer of the rasa dance among the forest groves, and especially under the Kadamba trees, and resident of the woods of Brinda, increasing the ecstasy of his devotees, reservoir of all love, the transcendental Cupid who uses his flowered arrows to increase the loving desires of gopis, the pleasure of the hearts of all coward women and men, and the abode of all wonderful qualities, the life of the Yamuna River, always absorbed in amorous pastimes, a mood of the mind, which is like the moonlight feeding Chakurabir. Heed my words, O mind. These holy names are full of nectarian mellows. Therefore, sing the glories of the Prabhupada.